right now I'm on Telegram. I have a few YouTube channels for my various projects, and let's just say I'm on Twitter too, a bit discreetly. It's I have to. Twitter is the public square, and I've been forcefully excluded from the public square, so I'm forced to wear disguises when I, kind of go onto Twitter.
That's an area where
try to
you
get
and
my thoughts out there. So.
Yeah, that's an area where you and I are kindred spirits. Is that platform access?
Yeah.
Do you believe that platform access is a civil right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm disappointed with the turn that Will Chamberlain has taken.
Why? How come? Because he's been the leader of that.
He was putting out a while back on that subject.
Because he has been great on that. I mean, that's how I found him.
Let us know when we're streaming again.
We're streaming. We're live. We're talking about now things that Patrick and I have in common. I think the most passionate thing that we both agree on is that platform access. We've both been essentially banned from various platforms. And I mean, I'm listening to Patrick. I don't agree with everything he's saying tonight, but I think he should have a right to say it. And I think that a big problem with conservatism right now in the whole, the free market people is that it's a losing future. Like they're basically promoting a policy where the left wins, where the left controls the public square, and that has a lot of consequences down the line. And they're just they're so obsessed with my free market, that they're just willing to allow other conservatives to be silenced in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we could definitely find common ground. And I'll just say this. I mean, the way I see things playing out in the optimistic, scenario, right? There's always the black hole perspective of just America continuing to decline, and just the country falls apart in like 200 years. But the optimistic scenario where we do see big change in the future, I think it is going to be a broad right-wing coalition, the kind of coalition you saw around the time of Donald Trump's election that ends up achieving victories on shared goals. So we don't agree on everything, and that's okay. But I mean, as long as we can understand that the left and globalism in general is going to destroy this country if it isn't stopped, we can find some common ground. And on the tech censorship thing, absolutely, I think that's one of the most important issues. Because we're not going to be able to push back against any other issue if we don't have our ability to get our thoughts out there. And these alternative platforms are good. Telegram, Gab, BitChute, DLive. It's good we have these, but at the end of the day, if you're not on the big ones, you're not really going to be able to reach new people.
Everybody always says that. Join MeWe, join this. I'm like,
and that is a perfect
Trump. If Trump's not there, I don't want to be there. You know what I mean? It's like I go to the platforms where all the people are. If all the people aren't there, then I might as well write in my diary.
Right. Yeah, I had people telling me to get on Minds, and I got on Minds, and I posted the Minds link on my my Telegram channel. I checked back 24 hours later. I literally had one follower.
Yeah,
I was like, all right, I don't know if there's actually anyone on here. Everyone told me to get on Minds.
Exactly.
But, go on, Dylan.
Guys, that's a perfect transition into the next topic we talk about, which is Trump. Has he kept his promises? And how are we doing on the whole Make America Great Again thing? Monitoring the situation is kind of what sparked me to move on to this topic, his monitoring of tech censorship. But let's talk Trump. Turtleboy, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I'd prefer if he was a little more assertive on platform access for his supporters who are constantly being silenced. He says some nice things. He tweets about it once in a while, but then you feel like he moves on to the next topic and he forgets about it. So I'm a little disappointed in that. There's no wall, even though he had a Republican Congress for 2 years, so there's really no excuse not to have a wall, quite frankly. But besides that, I've never, ever felt more confident with a foreign policy president than I do with Trump. Like after we killed Soleimani, there was all talk of World War III and whatever, and I just realized, I'm like, there's one thing Trump knows is that what could hurt him? War. And there's no way in hell this guy would ever bring us to war again in the Middle East. So I've never felt so confident in a president that we will not get involved in a war. My friends will not have to go over and fight for some stupid country that doesn't, value us over there, doesn't want us over there. So I feel really good in that regard. The economy's healthy. So I got very little complaints. I think I like Marco Rubio. It was silly me in the primaries. But now I'm a Trump guy. Now I was a hesitant Trump supporter in 2016. Now I'm like, can't wait to vote for him in 2020.
Right. So I'm somewhat of the opposite. I was
And Patrick, what about you?
I was a very enthusiastic Trump supporter during the 2016 election. Since then, my enthusiasm for Donald Trump and MAGA in general has declined. Now, I'll say this: he has achieved some things. Right. He killed TPP when he came into office. That's good. He's done a number of good things that have been blocked by the courts. Right, and he's had some victories there. Victory on the wall. There was some good stuff that happened with the asylum claims. I don't recall there being a final ruling. The Supreme Court gave him a temporary ruling saying he could block asylum claims, basically Central Americans coming up through Mexico, applying for asylum at the border, and then we can't turn them over. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that dynamic. The refugee thing that he did was good. That got blocked. The public charge rule was good. That got blocked, and then it got ruled by the Supreme Court. So it does appear that he is trying. The wall, I think there are things he could have done differently.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say in general, I had, higher hopes for where we'd be. So I lean, he does deserve to be criticized. Also, at the same time, you do have to keep in mind that he is facing a highly adversarial system, judiciary, mainstream media, the deep state, right, with Russiagate, which evolved into Ukrainegate. So I think any criticism of Trump has to be tempered by a recognition of what he's up against. But I'll say this: America, unless something drastic changes, I don't see things going too well for America. Even if you only value America's creedal components, even if you only value limited government, Second Amendment, First Amendment, laissez-faire, all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get less of that when you bring in people from the third world. We know the way that these people vote. Hispanics, Asians vote roughly 75%.
Doesn't have to be that way. Doesn't have to be that way. I think it's more like
you say it doesn't have to be that way,
yeah.
But it is.
They're coming around
at the same time, and we heard
they're coming around. The more they're introduced to prosperity, the more they're like, why the hell am I voting for Democrats? Trump got the same amount of Hispanic vote that Mitt Romney did, and he's Trump. He's the guy that allegedly hates Hispanics. They're not stupid. They don't fall for the charade and the lies. They understand, just like white people and all people, is that the most important things in their lives is economic security.
Perhaps, I'd say this. I don't think that saying that Donald Trump got as many Hispanic votes as the guy who ran before them is really a sign of progress. If anything, that's just goes to show that some of these voting patterns are kind of locked in, right? I mean, people lauded Donald Trump winning 1 to 2% more of the black vote is 5% in the right direction.
Yeah, but he wasn't going.
What percentage of
Trump?
What percentage of blacks did Trump win then?
About 9%, whereas Romney won 4%. However, going against a black president, that's obviously a wild card.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'll just say this. I mean, I'm not opposed to people voting for of any race, voting for the policies that I like. But I just don't see it changing. And I'm willing, you have all these predictions of this big Brexit that's coming in 2020. Well, I saw those before the midterms, and there wasn't much of a change in Trump's, in Trump's, not Trump's policy, but, black support for Trump. So I just don't think it's going to happen. I think that, there was a New York Times article that came out that was it was talking about the changing demographics in Northern Virginia, and they interviewed a number of Indians, right? And Indians are actually, I think, the most successful ethnic group at this point. I think they've surpassed, Ashkenazi Jews in terms of educational attainment, how much money. I think it might actually just be, average income. So, that's obvious, right? We've been bringing over, the best and the brightest from India generally, and that's what you get. But, for reasons purely of identity, these Indians that were interviewed, they said they support family, they support, lower taxes and stuff. But then they said, they were just like, but he's just a racist. He's just a racist, and I'm Indian. So you have that's kind of what I'm trying to get at here, and what we were discussing earlier is that people come over, they don't lose their identities when there are a lot of people like them out there, especially when these you're the Democratic Party and even the right do these appeals to identity. So identity is encouraged for everyone, but white Americans. So my thing is that it's not going to happen, right? I think it's too late, and the more of these people come over, the less likely, in fact, they are going to be to vote for the GOP. The more likely they are going to vote in ethnic blocs. They're going to come here. They're and join their ethnic advocacy organizations, and they're just kind of going to fall in line. I would like to be proven wrong. I don't think that's the case. If anyone wants to make a bet as to what black turnout is going to be for Donald Trump in the 2020 election, I'm more than willing to put a few.
I think it'll be higher.
That confident.
I think it'll be higher than it was in 2016. Maybe 2 points higher.
How much though?
Maybe 2 or 3 points.
2 points higher.
Yeah, maybe 11 and 12%.
Yeah, maybe. I've seen predictions of it being far higher, and I think those
as long as it's in the important states, as long as it's in Michigan, Wisconsin, Virginia, as long as it's in those states, that's where it really matters.
So let me ask you this. I mean, you do view getting minorities into the GOP as a serious goal that should be undertaken by conservatives, by the GOP in general. Mm-hmm. Why don't you support an immigration moratorium then, knowing that people do come over here and vote a certain way? Why don't we just shut down, it would make sense that if you're trying to do that, you'd want to shut down basically the process that is bringing in Democratic voters and then trying to get people here to vote Republican. But because instead, what we have from Conservatism Inc. is keep the floodgates open, keep the cheap labor coming in, and we'll get them voting.
Because I believe in the power of the human mind, that people are rational when you get down to it, and that I think that conservatism is a more rational mentality than liberalism, and that you bring people over here of Hispanic descent. And if you sell it to them the right way, they'll realize that what we are selling is a better bill of goods than what liberals are selling. I have faith in that. I see it all the time with people that I know that are Latino or whatever. They're just like they're all conservative. Like every minority that I'm friends with is a conservative, and they're even more conservative than white people because they hate being patronized by white liberals more than anything.
Sure. Well, I mean, that's a small sample size, as I'm sure you know. You're hanging out with the 25% of Hispanics who vote right wing. Well, I'll just say this. I mean, the Republican Party has been trying for decades to reach these people, and it just hasn't worked. And in fact, what Donald Trump came along and did is what Barry Goldwater advocated. After desegregation, mm-hmm. he discussed going hunting. Where the ducks are, so to speak. And what that meant is going and finding disaffected white people, basically appealing to the largest demographic in the country. Mm-hmm. And that's sometimes referred to as the Southern strategy or the Saylor strategy after Steve Saylor. That's kind of what Donald Trump did. He appealed to the white working class with implicit racial appeals. Now, he wasn't explicitly racial, contrary to what the media would say, but he understood the demographics that he was going for.
You sound like you could work at CNN.
Donald Trump. They would say that Donald Trump is a white nationalist, but no, implicit racial appeals, and he's applying. He's appealing to things that white America supports, and that's why 90% of Trump supporters are white. So I mean, that's really the core of my argument is that
90% of Republicans
you're not going to be able to get people like Trump. Yeah, exactly, right. So that goes to show Trump was just totally this different.
His following was
totally different, and
his following is no more whiter than any Republicans.
Right, and that would seem to suggest that, again, these things are kind of fixed. You have someone comes along and he's a total outsider, chaos candidate, as Jeb Bush described him, but nonetheless, the voting patterns remain somewhat the same, right? A few point differences between, this vote, that vote, this demographic, that demographic, not too much change.
Yeah.
So I think the burden of proof is really on the people who are saying that these minority appeals are going to work. It's really on them. What I advocate and what I certainly seem to certainly see as being the better option here, immigration moratorium and the GOP continuing to appeal to white America more. Because again, that's the bigger demographic, not at the exclusion of other demographics, but I think white people and white conservatives in general are so deracinated that they don't understand the power of identity. And I think that's an issue that conservatives, they just don't understand what it is like to have an ethnic or a racial identity, a sense of tribe. And that, I think, is really the primary thing that is motivating non-white people to vote for the Democratic Party. And I just see there being more tribalism. There's only going to be more tribalism the more diverse America becomes. And I mean, we can go to someone like Robert Putnam, who did a bunch of research on the effects of diversity on levels of trust, on social cohesion, social capital, and he was a liberal, right? He was a liberal social scientist, and he was utterly mortified with the results of the findings, the results of his study, which he later published. And I mean, if you look into the research that's been done on diversity, it almost always shows that it is a negative for all of these. Society tends to break down the more diverse that it becomes, and community is one of the first things that suffers. So people are just going to become more tribal. They're going to trust each other less, and the likelihood of them being kind of integrated and seeing themselves as Americans as kind of, the civic nationalism pipe dream, even that isn't going to come to fruition. So I think we can start wrapping up here. If you want to respond to that, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I don't know if Dylan's still with us, but I got to get going in a minute anyway. The correct.
Sure.
My video is just not. Can you put my video back on screen? My video is not on screen.
I don't know what's going on with that, but we know what you look like. We can see.
It's all good. We can do closing statements. Let's do closing statements.
I feel like I don't need to rehash everything. Feel like I'll close it with this. I think this is a productive conversation. I think conversations need to be had like this more. I think if more Groypers came at approached their arguments the way that you've done during this conversation, I think they would be taken a lot more seriously. That's my closing statement.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, I mean, I can't speak for all of the Groypers or everyone who's on my side, but I, at the very least, certainly do value these kinds of, these open discussions. That's really what I want to have. And I mean, when I asked the question I asked Charlie Kirk was totally in good faith. I understand he had to deal with some extremely incendiary ones before me, so he was a bit put off by that time. But I'm always willing to have these kinds of discussions with people as long as we're debating in good faith and so forth. So I appreciate taking the time out to do this.
Are you banned from CPAC?
I am banned from CPAC, so we're going to be throwing our own event, which we kind of hinted at, but that will be fully announced tomorrow.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Dylan. I appreciate you hosting this and setting this all up.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan.
All right, absolutely.
Okay.
Have a good night, guys.
All right, guys. See you later.
All right, take care. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.